Well, hey there team, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to Dagon. So this is free to play for starters, a free to play, dare I say, I'm guessing it's a walking simulator, but it's very much a narrative little escapade that you can play in VR based on Cthulhu mythos. From what I understand, it's based on the short story of the same name. Now look, I'm a humongous Lovecraft fan. I love all that sort of Cthulhu-y, esoteric, cosmic horror. I think it's very interesting. So it'd be worth having a look at here. And we'll see. I can be skeptical on walking sims. Sometimes you take all the game out of it, and what do you have? Well, something arguably that's a different medium, that's not necessarily a game. And I play games for a living. But that's sort of my biases at the front. Big fan of the source material, maybe not necessarily a fan of the format. Let's have a look and see what we can figure out. Dagon is a faithful interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work, focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot. Look, like I said, I'm critical, and that's a larger conversation that we're not going to have today, about whether a walking sim should be something that you find in a Steam storefront, right? I think there's arguments for that. At the end of the day, it is a grey area, right? But what I can say is the developers front-loading this information at the front so you know what you're in for from the very beginning, I think is fantastic. It's very honest as well, right? They're not hiding it behind other tags or anything.
Mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
Right. During the game, you'll encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background, and the author. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, you have to focus your eyes and look for the Elder sign. Okay, cool. You can also access all the found facts later. Cool. So there is a pixel hunt mechanic, but it also seems... There we go. So it's actually going to tell us what we can interact with. Oh, I'm locked in this scene, almost like Mist. I can't move past there. Okay. I know I can look to this, but that's interesting.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer.
Sure.
And shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Right. Well, I mean, you run out of your drugs. That's one way to react to it. Yeah. On the that's another genre I'm not the biggest fan of, is pixel hunty adventures. The idea of having a shortcut in a modern version where you can highlight what you can interact with is a welcome addition. I wish it was standard. Some games do it, some don't.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate.
Oh, okay, that's what someone who's a slave to morphine would probably say.
When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Yeah, righto, mate. Okay, what's going on there? Morphine! Entered into use in the 19th century. It was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War and the World War I. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Okay, I guess this isn't really super common knowledge, so it's cool that it's in here. Morphine became popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Frederick Sterner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. Well, there you go, I didn't know that. At this time, when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. That's cool. It's not dry or anything. Like, there's a bit to read, but it's relevant information, and it's not too overbearing. That's cool. I like that.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Yeah, right. And then, I haven't read Dagon in bloody 10, 15 years. He escapes on a lifeboat or something, right? Oh, here we go.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
Well, fair enough. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century. They were also known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows. Okay, cool. I'm not necessarily going to get bogged down in this, right? Remember, we are just sort of trying to showcase what this is all about, and we're getting a bit of a vibe for this. Now, there's, as I said, just before we go on much further, I like this. I'm enjoying this, especially as a fan, and it seems really well put together, these little set pieces. It knows what it is, right? This is something I harp about on the channel all the time, is you have all these games that don't understand project creep and scope creep, and they end up this thing that's in early access for bloody 5-10 years and goes nowhere and then peters out and never finishes. This knows exactly what it is. They've storyboarded it. They've obviously whiteboarded the whole project and come up with exactly these small chunks where you've got very limited view. I can understand it is made clearly with VR in mind. You've got your little bits of lore and you're pushing through the short story. Small bites of the pie, and it does it really well. However, I would argue this is not a game. But just to brush on it, I did touch on it earlier. Where do you put an experience? This is an interactive experience for sure, right? And I think I've seen some developers on Twitter, but anyone on Twitter is insane. But I've seen them get butthurt when people say your game's not really a game, right? It's not necessarily an insult or anything like that. Your game's not a movie, right? So something like this, I would argue, is a different kind of interactive medium. I'm not sure exactly what you would call it specifically, and I'm not really sure where you would put it. Not to say that it's piggybacking off of Steam, but if you were to make a storefront with these literary or even educational low-end, you know, it's definitely much more accessible, right, than an actual game with controls. Like, you know, maybe you're older, maybe you actually don't have an interest in video games, but you love Lovecraft and you want to see something like this manifest. You know, where do you put that? If you put it on its own storefront, does it fail? Is this something that Audible has to pick up, or Spotify? I don't know, right? But to call it a game, absolutely not. But let's continue anyway.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
There we go, see? I did remember a little bit of it. But like I said, my criticism of the medium and what this is, it's just a sign of our times, and if anything, it's cool to see new things springing up, like new genres of games, right?
I finally found
so I'm not
myself
critical
adrift
of what
and
this
free.
is.
I had
This
but
seems
little
cool.
idea of my surroundings.
And I guess, you know, if you want to go meta, who's going to platform this? Like I said, I'm strictly a video game showcaser, right? But who else is going to show this off to the public? Well, might as well be me,
Never
I
a
suppose.
competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of
Yeah,
the
right.
longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
Yeah, right. The old survival at sea training. Absolute misery. I'll tell you that. Tell you that for free.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
Yeah, right. Oh, I think I
But
skipped
neither
something.
ship nor
Oops.
land appeared, and
Well,
I
I'm
began
locked
to
into the sun.
despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
Okay, well, let's zip through this a little bit. I want to get to the island
Change
pushed
happened
up from
whilst I
the
slept.
ocean floor part.
Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Oh! Oh, goodness. Yeah, right.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
Yeah,
For
right.
there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity.
Yeah, right.
There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
We got anything else any facts about squids? Off we go.
As I crawled into the stranded boat,
Look at
I
that.
realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
Yeah, right. Okay, so look, we won't go for too long with this. I will close it out. I'm familiar with the short story. The short story is actually a great intro to all things Cthulhu-y. It's not all about Cthulhu, but I should say Lovecraft. So I don't expect this is going to be super long, right? Given the length of the original short story, it's literally a few pages. It's not really that big a deal. It's not that long. It's a great read, and this is a really cool experience. So you look, like I said, some closing thoughts. I'm happy to cover this. I've been a bit curmudgeon-y in the past on walking sims, and because I suppose, if we're being perfectly honest, I do feel that like they often are a pretty piss weak game. Like the mechanics will be poorly implemented and it's a delivery vehicle for someone's average story, right? Don't get me wrong, there is great story writing and story telling capacity in video games, but it's rarer than it is common, right? So I guess in my experience, a lot of walking sims aren't that great. This, however, I wouldn't even necessarily want to call this a walking sim because you're in fixed perspective. You're literally experiencing a classic story with a few sort of info things thrown in there. It is an interactive reading of a classic. I couldn't possibly tell you what to call that, but it is like I would actually, in a way, I feel it would be insulting to call this a walking sim, given the pedigree of walking sims in my experience. So anyway, long and short of it, this is cool. This is a different interactive medium. I'm happy to be here covering something so unusual and different and faithful as well. This is really cool. And I do appreciate that it is pretty bare bones, right? And it's free to play, obviously. You don't have to pay for anything like that. So I don't want to spoil it if you're somehow not familiar. If this is your first experience, this is a great gateway drug to Lovecraft, actually. So perhaps you should check it out yourself and have a watch of it. But yeah, look, I thought, there might be some value in having a look at it and at least putting it out there. I don't know if anyone else is going to cover it. But like I said, it's not something I necessarily want to ruin and just stream out this whole thing basically in this video. So, I think I've covered all my thoughts on that. This is pretty cool, actually. For someone who's usually pretty against this sort of stuff, I think, especially with the splash at the beginning, the developers just being so forthright about what they're doing here, I say good for them. And the wider conversation that I brushed on, like where do you put something like this? I don't know. But maybe we jump 5-10 years forward in the game industry and maybe something like this becomes so commonplace it gets its own storefront or it gets its own carved out corner of Steam. I don't know. But yeah, this is pretty cool. I quite like this actually. All right, check it out yourself. Like I said, free to play on Steam. Dagon. Might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.